unsheathed my sword and said, "For the honor of Grayskull!"
Remember Saturday mornings in 1985? The smell of cereal, the sounds of cartoons filling living rooms across America. And if you were lucky, you caught something special. A warrior princess riding a flying unicorn, raising a magic sword high. That show changed everything for a generation of kids. Today, we're diving deep into She-Ra, Princess of Power, 1985, 10 wild facts you didn't know. Fact 10. She-Ra was created because 30% of He-Man's audience was girls. Back in the early 1980s, Mattel and Filmation made an interesting discovery about their massively popular He-Man and the Masters of the Universe series. While they designed it specifically to appeal to young boys, the numbers told a different story. 30% of He-Man's audience consisted of girls. This was huge. Here was an untapped market sitting right in front of them, watching a show about a muscle-bound hero defending Castle Grayskull. Rather than ignore this demographic detail, Mattel saw an opportunity. They partnered with Filmation to create a female counterpart to He-Man, someone who could appeal to that female audience while expanding the Masters of the Universe franchise. The result was She-Ra, and the approach was deliberate. They wanted to create a character who was strong, powerful, and heroic, just like He-Man, but designed specifically with girls in mind. The creation process was a true collaboration. Unlike He-Man, which was based on an existing toy line, She-Ra was developed jointly by Filmation's writers and Mattel's designers. Writers Larry DiTillio and J. Michael Straczynski, who would later become famous for creating Babylon 5, developed the initial characters and premise for Filmation. Their work laid the foundation for Princess Adora's story and the world of Etheria. Mattel then designed additional characters and, of course, provided the financial backing for both the series and the accompanying toy line. This collaboration resulted in something unique for its time. She-Ra wasn't just a female version of He-Man thrown together quickly. She had her own world, her own supporting cast, and her own distinct identity. The planet Etheria was distinct from Eternia, with its own magical properties, kingdoms, and conflicts. Where He-Man faced Skeletor's attempts to conquer Castle Grayskull, She-Ra led the Great Rebellion against the evil Horde's actual occupation of Etheria. The stakes were different, the tone was different, and the storytelling reflected that. The show premiered in 1985 and ran for 2 seasons, totaling 93 episodes, before ending in December 1986. The first season aired 5 days a week, just like He-Man had, bringing new adventures every weeknight. This daily format meant kids could follow She-Ra's story continuously, building anticipation for each new episode. The second season shifted to Saturday mornings, a prestigious time slot that put She-Ra alongside other major cartoon franchises of the era. Fact 9. The show started as a theatrical movie that made over 3 times its budget. Before She-Ra became a television series, she made her debut on the big screen. On March 22, 1985, several months before the TV show premiered, Filmation released an animated theatrical film called He-Man and She-Ra, The Secret of the Sword. This 91-minute movie introduced audiences to Princess Adora and revealed her shocking connection to He-Man. The film was actually created on a remarkably modest budget of just $2 million. But it struck gold at the box office. According to Lou Scheimer himself, the executive producer of both He-Man and She-Ra, the movie grossed over $7.5 million before finishing its theatrical run. That's more than 3 times what it cost to make. Not bad for a Saturday morning cartoon extended to feature length, as some critics described it at the time. The Secret of the Sword told the origin story of She-Ra. It revealed that Princess Adora was actually He-Man's long-lost twin sister, kidnapped as an infant by the evil Hordak and taken to the planet Etheria. There, she was raised under mind control to serve as a force captain in the evil Horde, completely unaware of her true heritage. When He-Man arrives on Etheria with the Sword of Protection, Adora learns the truth about her past and transforms into She-Ra for the first time. 6 months after its theatrical release, the movie was cleverly repurposed for television. It was split into 5 separate episodes and aired during the premiere week of the She-Ra TV series, from September 9th to 13th, 1985. These 5 episodes served as the show's origin story, setting up the ongoing conflict between the Great Rebellion and the evil Horde that would drive the series forward. Fact 8. One voice actor played dozens of characters using a harmonizer. Here's where things get fascinating from a production standpoint. Lou Scheimer, the executive producer of She-Ra, was also one of the show's most prolific voice actors. But he didn't use his real name in the credits. Instead, he went by the pseudonym Eric Gundon. Under this name, Scheimer voiced an astonishing number of characters including Swift Wind, Cowl, Broom, Light Hope, Mantenna, Leech, Grizzler, Modulok, and many more. Why did one person voice so many characters? The answer comes down to budget constraints. The professional voice actors who worked on She-Ra were contracted to perform no more than 3 different voices per episode. Since there were usually only 3 regular cast members working on each show, someone had to fill in all the remaining parts. That someone was Lou Scheimer. But here's the truly wild part. Scheimer didn't consider himself a proper actor and was actually ashamed to record alongside the professional voice actors. So during the 2nd season of He-Man and throughout all of She-Ra, he and his daughter Erica recorded their voices separately after the main cast had finished. The technical solution to making one man sound like so many different characters was a device called a harmonizer. This machine could change the pitch of Scheimer's voice without altering the speed of the recording, allowing him to create distinctly different-sounding characters. Erica Scheimer, Lou's daughter, also contributed extensively to the show. She voiced Loo-Kee, Queen Angela, Imp, Frosta, Peekaboo, Flutterina, and numerous other characters. She also directed the voice actors and sang on the show's theme song. The Scheimer family truly was a one-family production powerhouse for filmation. Fact 7. Mattel called She-Ra a fashion action doll because they didn't know where to put her in stores. When it came time to market the She-Ra toy line, Mattel faced an unusual dilemma. The character was a sword-wielding warrior who battled evil forces, but she was designed to appeal to girls. In the toy industry of the 1980s, this created a classification problem. Was she an action figure, which belonged in the boys' aisles alongside He-Man and G.I. Joe? Or was she a doll, which belonged near Barbie in the girls' section? Mattel's solution was to invent a new category entirely. They officially described She-Ra as a fashion action doll. This strange hybrid designation was meant to bridge the gap between the testosterone-fueled action figure market and the traditional doll market. The She-Ra toys came with weapons and accessories like action figures, but they also featured brushable hair like traditional dolls. This was in stark contrast to the female characters in the He-Man toy line, like Teela and Evil Lynn, whose hair was completely molded plastic. This classification left retail stores in a quandary. Should they place She-Ra near Barbie and other dolls? Or should they stock her among the action figures? Different stores made different choices, and there was no industry standard. Some placed her in both sections. Others tried to create separate end caps that highlighted the Princess of Power line as its own thing. It was an awkward situation that reflected the challenge of marketing a strong female action character to girls in an era when such things simply weren't common. A late 1980s study arranged by the Institute for the Study of Women and Men at the University of Southern California actually looked at how girls perceived different toy lines. They graded various dolls and action figures based on what girls thought their toys were most or least likely to do. The results were telling. Barbie was expected to be out on a date. She-Ra, on the other hand, was thought to be less likely to cry. Girls understood that She-Ra represented something different, something stronger and more independent than traditional dolls. Interestingly, Mattel saw She-Ra as what's called a flanker line in the toy industry. A flanker line is created to support a main product by expanding a category. At the time, Barbie sales had flattened out, and Mattel hoped that introducing a competitive fashion doll line they owned would expand the entire category and allow Barbie sales to grow. According to Janice Varney Hamlin, who was in charge of marketing for girls' merchandise at Mattel, the strategy worked. After surviving competition from rival toy line Gem and the Holograms, Barbie posted $350 million in sales in 1986. Fact 6. The original She-Ra doll had a mask feature that girls hated. The very first She-Ra action doll released in 1985 came with an interesting design feature that Mattel thought would be cool. She had a winged headdress that could be flipped upside down and worn as a mask. It was meant to add play value and give kids more options when playing with the toy. There was just one problem. Girls in focus groups absolutely hated it. When Mattel tested the mask feature with their target audience, the response was overwhelmingly negative. The kids didn't want She-Ra to have a mask. They wanted to see her face, her hair, her features. The mask made her look strange and hid what made the character appealing to them in the first place. Based on this feedback, Mattel quickly abandoned the mask idea. They moved away from the feature, and toy buyers were rarely even aware it had been part of the original design. Meanwhile, in the animated series, Filmation had She-Ra sporting a more conventional tiara instead of the winged mask. This became the iconic look that everyone remembers today. That simple golden tiara, worn with confidence by a powerful warrior princess, became one of She-Ra's signature elements. It's a fascinating example of how companies actually listened to their audience back then. When kids said they didn't like something, Mattel changed course. They understood that the success of the toy line depended on giving girls what they actually wanted, not what the designers thought they might want. Fact 5. Loo-Kee was one of television's original Easter eggs. If you watched She-Ra as a kid, you probably remember the hunt for Loo-Kee. This small, elf-like creature with bright clothing and blue hair would hide somewhere in almost every episode. He'd be tucked behind a tree, peeking out from behind a rock, or partially concealed by foliage in the background. Finding him became an obsession for many young viewers. At the end of each episode, Loo-Kee would appear and ask viewers if they'd managed to spot him during the show. Then he'd say something like, "Did you find me? I came out here," and the scene where he was hiding would replay, this time with him clearly visible. It was one of the first interactive elements designed specifically for children's television. According to various sources, Loo-Kee appeared in about 86 of the show's 93 episodes. He wasn't in the 5-part pilot that became The Secret of the Sword, and there were 2 episodes where he was actually central to the plot, rather than just hiding in the background. For many kids watching the show, especially in places like Korea where it aired in the mid-1980s, finding Loo-Kee was actually more memorable than the main storylines. Some children would focus entirely on scanning the screen for this hidden character, paying less attention to whatever She-Ra and the Great Rebellion were doing that week. This was a clever strategy that showed Filmation understood children's psychology. Kids love games, they love challenges, and they love the feeling of accomplishment when they find something others might have missed. By adding Loo-Kee to the show, Filmation gave children a reason to pay close attention to every frame. Even if they weren't particularly interested in the main story, they'd stay engaged, trying to find that hidden character. Fact 4. Melindy Britt voiced both She-Ra and her arch-nemesis, Katra. Melindy Britt, the actress who gave voice to She-Ra and Princess Adora, had an impressive range. She didn't just voice the heroine of the show, she also voiced Katra, one of She-Ra's primary antagonists. And she didn't stop there. Britt provided voices for Costa Spella, Mermista, Octavia, Hunga, and numerous other characters throughout the series. This was common practice in the world of 1980s animation voice work. The pool of voice actors was relatively small, and talented performers who could create distinct character voices were in high demand. Britt came from a theater background, having grown up in Houston, Texas, and received a scholarship to the Alley Theater where she studied the classics. This theatrical training gave her the skills to create varied, believable characters. In an interview years later, Britt reflected on her experience voicing She-Ra. When asked about She-Ra's famous battle cry, she said she always felt it deeply. She couldn't explain exactly why, but there was something intrinsic about the role that resonated with her. When she watched the series again at the 25th anniversary, after not having seen it for years, she was impressed by her own performance. She remembered thinking to herself, "Wow, you really nailed that. You must have really felt it." Britt had an interesting perspective on her on-camera work versus her voice work. She mentioned that so much of the live-action roles she got were superficial. Because she was conventionally attractive, she'd always get cast as either the good wife or the bad woman, and that was about it. Voice acting gave her the freedom to play a much wider range of characters without being typecast based on her appearance. Fact 3. She-Ra merchandise sold well but couldn't match He-Man's success. Despite an aggressive marketing campaign and the popularity of the television show, She-Ra merchandise never quite reached the stratospheric heights of He-Man's toy sales. The numbers tell a stark story. According to former Mattel employee Roger Sweet, roughly $60 million worth of She-Ra merchandise was sold in 1985. That sounds impressive until you compare it to He-Man, which brought in $400 million in 1986. The sales gap created tension within Mattel. Employees in charge of the boys' toy lines were adamant that She-Ra was responsible for their declining sales. They blamed the Princess of Power line for cannibalizing sales that should have gone to He-Man and other boys' toys. However, this was likely a misdiagnosis of the problem. The real culprit was almost certainly oversaturation in the action figure market. By the mid-1980s, there were simply too many competing toy lines, and the bubble was beginning to burst. This oversaturation would ultimately lead to She-Ra's premature end. The show was canceled partway through its second season, with its final episode airing on December 2nd, 1986, managing only 93 total episodes. For context, the original He-Man series ran for 130 episodes. The character of She-Ra wasn't even mentioned in the 2 subsequent He-Man animated series that followed in later years. Despite the sales disappointment relative to He-Man, She-Ra still found her audience. The show had dedicated fans who loved the characters, the stories, and what She-Ra represented. For many young girls growing up in the 1980s, She-Ra was one of the few strong female action heroes available on television. She could fight, she could lead, she could solve problems, and she could do it all without needing to be rescued by a man. She had compassion and kindness, but also incredible strength and courage. She represented a balance that resonated deeply with viewers. The toy line itself was actually quite impressive. About 20% of Princess of Power toy purchasers were female, including adult women and girls, which was significant for what was marketed as a girls' toy line. The dolls came with elaborate outfits, weapons, magical accessories, and that signature brushable hair. There were castles and vehicles and creatures. The evil Horde members were eventually incorporated into the Masters of the Universe toy line, allowing kids who had both He-Man and She-Ra toys to create epic crossover battles in their playrooms. Fact 2. Mattel paid $25,000 for the rights to a fantasy novel character named She-Ra just to prevent confusion. Before Mattel launched the Princess of Power toy line, they did their due diligence. Their legal team discovered that author Barbara Hambly had written a fantasy novel called The Ladies of Mandragon, which featured a character named She-Ra. The spelling was different, but the pronunciation was identical, and that was close enough to cause concern. Now here's the interesting part. There were no obvious similarities between Hambly's She-Ra and Mattel's She-Ra. The characters weren't alike. The stories were completely different, and there was no real risk of consumer confusion between a fantasy novel aimed at adults and an animated television show aimed at children. But Mattel's legal team was thinking strategically. Their concern wasn't about being sued by Hambly. What worried them was the possibility that competing toy companies might muddy the waters by creating their own She-Ra or She-Ra toy line, claiming they were based on Hambly's character. In the cutthroat world of 1980s toy marketing, this kind of thing wasn't unheard of. competitors would look for any legal loophole to cash in on another company's success. So Mattel took preemptive action. They approached Hambly and purchased the ancillary rights to the Ladies of Mandragon books for $25,000. This effectively locked down the name across all commercial uses, making it impossible for rival toy companies to create a competing line based on Hambly's character. It was a relatively small investment that protected their much larger investment in the She-Ra brand. This kind of intellectual property maneuvering was typical of how major corporations operated in the 1980s. They'd identify potential problems before they arose and spend money to eliminate them. For $25,000, Mattel bought peace of mind and protected a toy line they hoped would generate hundreds of millions in revenue. Fact 1. The show featured better production values than you'd expect for its budget. If you go back and watch She-Ra today, you might be surprised by how good it looks, especially the music and background art. This wasn't accidental. Despite operating under severe budget restrictions, Filmation managed to create something that felt more polished than most Saturday morning cartoons of its era. The background artists deserve special recognition. They created colorful, detailed landscapes for the sci-fi and fantasy world of Etheria. The backgrounds would alternate between bright, hopeful scenes in the Whispering Woods, where the rebellion gathered, and dark, ominous settings in the Fright Zone, where Hordak's forces dwelled. These backgrounds gave Etheria a sense of being a real place, with different regions and atmospheres. The music was particularly impressive for a show on such a tight budget. The theme song had actual depth to it, with instrumental arrangements that went beyond the simple synthesizer tracks that dominated many cartoons of the time. And unlike most Filmation cartoons, which just played an instrumental version of the opening theme over the end credits, She-Ra's end credits featured a completely different song with different lyrics. Some viewers have speculated that She-Ra actually had a higher budget than He-Man, with the extra money going into the music and those distinctive golden, scintillating light effects that appeared whenever She-Ra transformed. Lou Scheimer's work as executive producer showed throughout. He was the only producer at the time creating American-made cartoons for kids, which was a real achievement in an era when many studios were outsourcing animation work overseas. Scheimer oversaw the writing and production, contributed voice work, and even wrote music under the pseudonym Erica Lane, which combined the names of his daughter Erica and son Lane. The quality of She-Ra was a testament to what dedicated creators could accomplish even with limited resources. They cared about making something that would resonate with children, something with real heart and genuine entertainment value. She-Ra. Princess of Power ran for just 2 seasons and 93 episodes, but its impact lasted far longer. For a generation of kids who grew up in the mid-1980s, She-Ra represented something important. She was strong without being masculine, compassionate without being weak, and heroic without needing anyone to save her. The show broke stereotypes and gave young girls a character they could look up to, someone who proved that princesses could also be warriors. The series may not have achieved the same commercial success as He-Man, but it succeeded in ways that mattered more. It showed that there was an audience for strong female characters in action and adventure stories. It demonstrated that girls wanted heroes they could relate to, characters who could fight evil and still be feminine. The lessons She-Ra taught went beyond the moral segments at the end of each episode. The character herself was the lesson. Today, She-Ra's legacy lives on. The character has been rebooted for new generations, most recently in the acclaimed Netflix series She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which ran from 2018 to 2020. But for those who grew up with the original, there's something special about that 1985 version. The animation style, the voice acting, the music, the stories, they're all part of the fabric of childhood memories. Think about those Saturday mornings or weekday afternoons. The way the opening theme would start, building excitement as the narrator set up the conflict between the Great Rebellion and the evil Horde. The transformation sequence where Adora would raise the Sword of Protection and call upon the power of Grayskull. The flash of light, the change in costume, the moment when she became She-Ra, And poor Spirit, Adora's horse, would transform into Swift Wind, suddenly gaining wings, a horn, and the ability to talk. Every episode had these moments of magic that made you believe in the impossible. The supporting cast added so much richness to the world. Bo, the handsome rebel with his heart-shaped arrows that could produce music or create nets. Glimmer, who could teleport in bursts of sparkles. Madame Raz, the bumbling but good-hearted witch who talked to her broom. Queen Angela, with her magnificent wings. These characters weren't just sidekicks, they had their own personalities, their own stories, their own reasons for fighting the Horde. And the villains were memorable too. Hordak, with his transforming arm and his booming voice. Shadow Weaver, whose face was always hidden beneath that creepy red mask, wielding dark magic that made even other villains nervous. Katra with her mask that gave her feline powers, constantly scheming to prove herself. Mantenna with his extendable eye stalks. Leech with his suction abilities. Scorpia with her pincers. The Horde felt like a real army of unique threats, not just faceless minions. So the next time someone brings up Saturday morning cartoons from the 1980s, remember She-Ra. Remember Princess Adora raising the sword of protection high and shouting, "For the honor of Grayskull." Remember Swift Wind, the flying unicorn, and Bo with his musical arrows, and Glimmer, who could teleport. Remember Hordak and the evil Horde, Shadow Weaver's dark magic, and Katra's feline fury. And remember Loo-Kee, hiding in the background, waiting to be found. If you enjoyed learning these wild facts about She-Ra, Princess of Power, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more nostalgic deep dives into the shows that shaped our childhoods. Drop a comment below and tell us what your favorite She-Ra memory is. Did you have the toys? Did you hunt for Loo-Kee every episode? We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and for the honor of Grayskull.